We're going to start out today by first introducing the topic. Jamie Richardson, who's the superintendent at Churchill Downs, will have a short question and answer because there's been some exciting things that are happening in that area right now. We're then going to talk about cool season grass selection, then going to go to warm season grass selection, blue muta or overseeding of a warm season grass with a cool season grass. And then we're going to talk about managing turf grasses for both cool and warm seasons, and then turf grass selection to match the racing or competition seasons. I want to mention the sponsors that we have for this event. We've got Equinox Racing, Duralock Fencing, John Deere, and Horseman's Track and Equipment, who have helped subsidize or help subsidize the cost of developing this materials. Before we start, I'd like to show you a short video to kind of highlight the fact that we're dealing with a really challenging situation when we deal with horse racing or any equestrian sport. Unlike other activities that are done on grass, the dynamic loading of the turf from a 1,000-pound animal that's going almost 40 miles an hour represents an incredible challenge for the surface. If we look at the way that the horse is loading the surface and the effect on the turf, we see the challenges that we're facing in this area. So I would like to now start discussing some of the things that we've talked about with Jamie Richardson. Jamie has spent most of his career in racetrack maintenance. During this time, he's seen some big changes in the popularity of turf racing and the importance of turf as a racing surface. Jamie, when was the first turf track installed at Churchill Downs, and why do you think turf track was added, and what grass species was used?
So the turf track was constructed in 1985. It was allowed to grow in, it was seeded, not sod. So it was allowed to grow in through this year of 86 and then started to be used in 87. And it's my understanding that pretty much what drove the turf track at Churchill was the Breeders' Cup. The Breeders' Cup was just a sort of a starting event, but I think it did well from day one, and they realized that they wanted to go to different venues. So, you know, Churchill, that was one of the big pushes was to, in order to have the Breeders' Cup at Churchill, which at that time, the Breeders' Cup only had 2 turf races. Now I think over the 2 days, they have 8. It used to be a one-day event, 2 turf races for Breeders' Cup. So it was started to be used in 1987, and actually the first Breeders' Cup was at Churchill in 88. The grasses that were originally used in that course were Kentucky 31 and Midnight Bluegrass. Both of them, a lot of people will know, are fairly challenging. You know, they're not very disease or drought tolerant, either one. I think Midnight Blue, if you look at it wrong, it gets disease. So it's been challenging because we still have some of it out there, although we did change over to a more modern bluegrass a few years ago, but I can still see some patches of it out there.
So that's interesting in the context. In the past decade, turf has increased from about 10% of total racing starts to almost 20%. You know, you think about it, there wasn't even a turf course until 1987. And now we look at 20%. Does this trend kind of match your experience at Churchill Downs, and how has increased demand for turf racing changed the ways the surface is maintained?
So, you know, I was running the numbers the other day, and we're up to over 27, almost 30%. We actually had 4 races out of 9 yesterday on the turf, 4 races out of 11 on the turf Saturday. The weather has been very cooperative this year, so and the turf, you know, we've had good growing weather this year, so the turfs responded favorably, and we've been using it, also knowing that it's the last meet, you know, but we're still trying to, you know, keep everything in good shape and safe. But turf racing is just, it's grown so much. Again, you know, the Churchill turf was built probably mainly for the Breeders' Cup, and you know they had 2 races, and now they have 8 in there, 7 or 8, I believe, and maybe it's 7, but I know it's quite a few races, Breeders' Cup races. You know, you look at places like New York where they converted the old inner track that was their winter track, you know, into a second turf course. You know, Newton Ira has 2 courses at each of their tracks. And, you know, that's great for them. I mean, I think they probably run upwards of 40% on the turf. You know, so we've got 1 7/8 mile turf course. You know, we need to maximize as much as we can out of that. You know, maintenance, you know, you can't do, you know, you're always going to try to take care of the grass as much as you can and keep it as safe for the horses. And so, you know, they have a limited lifespan. You know, right now you know, we've run 71 turf races and 27 days of racing. You know, I've got 3 more weeks and we've got graded stakes the last weekend. So, you know, I'm starting to have conversations with the racing secretary, like, you know, we need to back off a little bit here because, you know, we need to have something left. I don't want a plowed field the last weekend of racing. So, you know, it's challenging, but you know, that's why I think everybody's trying to design a course that has a good draining growing medium and a tough, strong grass. I mean, that's where it's at, you know, so that you can have more racing and safe and maintain, you know, safety at a top level.
Since you arrived at Churchill, the turf has been a particular emphasis. I think it was your primary emphasis when you first started. What changes have you made to deal with this increased pressure on racing on the turf?
So Churchill has good drainage under it. It actually, for as old as that system is, it still does drain well. So we've really focused on aerating and trying to get, you know, the water to run through it. I felt like it needed to be aerated some more. It had some compaction issues. And then we've also focused on, you know, trying to deep water and promote root growth. You know, we've also gone to an organic fertilized program. And I have seen the soil health increase drastically. So we've really focused on aeration, root growth, drainage, and you know, we've run soil tests and tried to use a fertilized program that you know, really takes care of everything that we need in our soil, you know, our needs.
So that comes to the question of you're putting in a new turf track. What are your biggest goals for this? It's a very significant investment. What are your goals for Churchill Downs?
So safety first and foremost. You know, we want to get as much racing out of it as possible. The old course at Churchill also was constructed with a crown, which means basically the outside third of the course was useless. You know, it tipped to the outside. So we're taking that out, removing the crown, and in everything that we've been looking at, you know, a lot of the turf experts I've spoken with have really recommended Bermuda grass. And so, you know, Bermuda, the technology has come along so much, and I'm familiar with Bermuda. They had it at Colonial Downs, which is an absolute excellent turf course. I mean, it's probably one of the best turf courses, I believe, out there. But it's Bermuda, and they run in the heat of the summer. They, you know, with the technology in Bermuda and the changing climate, I mean, you know, I don't think it gets as cold as it. I mean, you can get cold spells, but they've also got these Bermudas that are very cold tolerant. And so we've opted to go with a Bermuda grass and overseed it with rye and in the cool seasons. And I'm really hoping that, you know, we can, you know, up above 30% of our races on the turf and have a very, very safe racing surface.
So this is kind of a big change. So what challenges do you anticipate coming into this period of time with the new track?
So the first year, you know, we'll have the sod down in September. It might go into early October, you know, depending on construction schedule and weather. And so when we get the when we get the Bermuda in this year, it's kind of coming to the end of the growing season for Bermuda. We're going to overseed it with rye when we get it down so that, that'll give it color. But for next spring, we're actually going to have to rely on some of that rye for some structural, strength too. I think in the future, the rye will, once the Bermuda gets established and we've had a summer of growing on it, I believe the rye grass will be more for just color. But it's that first spring, next spring, getting through that, is going to be a little nerve wracking. I mean, I feel comfortable. I've talked to numerous people that will be okay, but it's once that Bermuda's had a summer to set in and just set up, get a good root structure under it, I think we're going to be great. And then, every year it's going to be new, we'll have to spray out the rye in late spring, early summer, and then we'll reintroduce rye in September, October. So that's going to be new, but, I kind of welcome that, keeping cool season grasses alive, especially in a real sandy growing medium like Churchill is. In a hot, humid summer that we get here in Louisville, that's been challenging. So I will welcome, Bermuda will thrive in that climate, so in that environment. So I'm looking forward to not worrying about, disease and struggling with the cool season grasses through the hot, humid summer. But now we're going to be managing more in the cooler seasons, just getting the rye established and then, spraying it out the next spring.
That'll be quite a change. You'll get to enjoy the hot, humid summers and relax during that and move on.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Jamie. That kind of sets the table for us for discussing grass selection. So in that vein, our first speaker then of the session, thanks, Jamie, for the introduction, is going to be talking about cool season grass selection. We've got two speakers. Mike Goatley is a professor and extension turfgrass specialist in Virginia Tech School of Plant and Environmental Sciences. He's been advising and doing outreach and teaching for over 32 years at both Mississippi State and Virginia Tech. Our second speaker is Dr. Greg Munshaw. He's the director of agronomy for Mountain View Seeds. He tests experimental variety and educates on the benefits of reducing inputs to turf. Prior to Mountain View, he was an associate professor at University of Kentucky and Mississippi State. I will pass this off to the two of them to talk.
This is Karen, and this is her land. She's been here a long time, along with Mojo. The first fence post went up here. Now there's 5,000 of them. After the storm, she started the cleanup here. And when she needs some peace and quiet, she always finds it right here. This is more than just land, it's home. Karen runs with us on a John Deere 3E Series tractor, because who says a day's work has to take all day? Nothing runs like a Deere. Search John Deere 3E Series for more.
Being a teenager and in high school and middle school is not easy for girls these days. And they get to come here, spend time working around the farm, spend time with the animals, and not feel that pressure until we go to horse shows. The first time I saw this land, I was about 12 years old. I came here with an old mentor. I fell in love with it as a little girl, and I said I was gonna own it one day. My mother, when I was 4 years old, put me on a little pony walking around the zoo. That was it for me. Love at first sight. Like any kid, when I was younger, I wanted to compete more in the Olympics and go Grand Prix and do things like that. But I put that all on the side and realized I had a different agenda in life. I've taught about 800 kids in this area. A typical day starts early in the morning with feeding the horses. Then usually we clean stalls. This is a daily chore, sometimes twice a day. I'm always on the tractor, mowing, spreading things around, you name it. This is a John Deere 3025P. I love my tractor. I couldn't live without it. I like to just relax and be left alone. I call it my husband. He's very reliable, and it doesn't argue. It's so easy to use. My 68-year-old mother has never driven anything like this before, and she was scared to death of it. And once she did, she loves it. She drives it all the time for me and helps me out around the farm. Being here in Florida, we deal with a lot of hurricanes, so it can be very stressful when we're in the path of one. That John Deere helps me so much. We go around picking up debris, moving, pushing things with the bucket. I always have an average of 50 students, so whenever there's a disaster that comes around, they're always here and they're ready to work. I call all my girls my kids. They're like part of my family, and they get scholarships for riding, and so we try to keep our sport here a little bit serious but fun. We go to the horse shows. It's great for them. Good, very nice. Teaches them a lot of sportsmanship, how to be more in charge and have more self-confidence. A little stronger on that. There. The parents tell me all the time, you are such a huge influence in our child's life. I love to share my experience with these girls and be able to steer them in a better path. Everybody always asks me, how do you keep doing this? I say, just the sheer passion of it. What am I gonna do? Get a condo on the beach somewhere? I'm happier here. I'm Karen Neese, and this is my land.